Zephaniah chapter 1. The word of the Lord came, not in the silence of the night, but in the trembling of the earth, in the weight of the wind that carried his voice across the nations. A call, a warning, a lamentation. The voice of the Almighty, reaching through the generations, seeking those who would listen, calling them back before the day of reckoning. I will sweep away everything from the face of the earth, he declared, his sorrow woven into the very fabric of his words, not out of cruelty, not in reckless fury, but because the world had turned its back on him. Man and beast, bird and fish, all that walked and swam and soared, corrupted, lost, severed from the hand that had formed them. Even the idols, carved with human hands, standing in silent defiance, leading the wicked to stumble and fall. They too would be taken, shattered, forgotten beneath the weight of judgment. His hand stretched out, not only upon the distant lands, but upon Judah, upon Jerusalem. His chosen people, who had once walked in his ways, now bowed on their rooftops, worshipping the stars, whispering empty prayers to gods that neither saw nor heard. They swore by his name, yet their lips also praised Molech. They stood at the temple's gates, yet their hearts wandered far from him. They no longer sought him, no longer turned their faces to his presence, no longer called upon his name with trembling lips. Be silent before the sovereign Lord, he commanded, for the day was near, the time appointed, the moment set. A sacrifice had been prepared, a judgment sealed, and none would escape its reach. Kings and their sons, dressed in foreign garments, parading their power like a shield against the inevitable, punished. Those who filled their temples with violence, who walked in deception, who spoke of peace, yet built their wealth upon the suffering of others, laid bare before the consuming fire. A cry would rise from the fish gate, wailing from the streets, sorrow spilling from the markets where merchants once thrived. Silver would lose its worth, gold would fall to dust. Those who had rested in comfort, who believed the Lord would neither act nor intervene, who had built their lives upon the shifting sands of their own making, stripped of their false security, their wealth plundered, their houses left in ruins, their vineyards untended, their labor bearing no fruit. The great day of the Lord was near, pressing upon the horizon like a storm, its arrival swift, its sound bitter upon the ears of those who had ignored its coming. It would be a day unlike any before it, a day of anguish, of distress, of ruin and wrath. Darkness would stretch across the heavens, the light swallowed in gloom. Trumpets would sound, battle cries would echo, walls would crumble, towers would fall. There would be no hiding, no escape. A blindness would overtake them, not of the eyes, but of the soul. For they had sinned against the Lord, and their judgment would be poured out like dust upon the earth. Neither silver nor gold could ransom them from his wrath. No wealth, no status, no plea would stand against the fire of his jealousy. The whole earth would bear witness to his judgment, for he would bring an end, sudden, complete, to all who defied him. Yet even as his voice thundered with warning, there remained a whisper of hope. Gather together, he called, before the decree takes effect, before the day passes like chaff in the wind, before the fire of my anger consumes the land. A plea, an invitation not to all, but to the humble, to those who still sought righteousness, who still bent their knees in reverence. Perhaps, in the shelter of their humility, they would find mercy, they would be spared. But for the wicked, the cities that stood in pride, their fate was sealed. Gaza abandoned, Ashkelon reduced to ruins, the strongholds of Ashdod and Ekron uprooted as easily as the dust from the ground. Woe to those who lived by the sea, to those who had taken what was not theirs, who had mocked the people of the Lord. The land they had claimed would become desolate, pastures for flocks, a dwelling place not for kings, but for shepherds. The remnant of Judah, the few who remained faithful, would inherit what had been lost, and in the evening light they would lie down in peace. The Lord had heard the insults of Moab, the taunts of the Ammonites, those who laughed at his people, who threatened their land, but their mockery would not go unanswered. They would become as Sodom and Gomorrah, barren and forgotten, a wasteland where nothing grew. The arrogance of nations, their pride and self-sufficiency, would be their undoing. Those who had once mocked the Lord would bow before him in trembling reverence. Distant lands would acknowledge his name, not in defiance, but in awe. Even the mightiest would fall. The Cushites, slain, Assyria, the once great empire, its power shattered. Nineveh, proud and untouchable, now a desolation, its streets empty, its walls silent. Wild beasts would claim its towers, owls would nest in its ruins, the wind would carry only the echoes of a city that had declared, "I am the greatest, and there is none besides me." But now, all who passed by would shake their heads, whispering of its fall. The city of oppression, of rebellion, of unrepentant sin, Jerusalem too, stood at the brink. She accepted no correction, trusted in no law, sought no refuge in the Lord. Her leaders, once meant to guide, had become ravenous lions. Her rulers, wolves who tore apart their prey. Her prophets spoke not the truth, but deceit, and her priests defiled what was sacred, twisting the law for their own gain. But the Lord, ever just, had not abandoned her. Morning by morning, he dispensed his justice, yet the wicked took no shame in their deeds. He had given them time. He had allowed them to see the fall of nations, to witness his hand at work, to turn back before it was too late. But still, they acted in corruption, eager to pursue their own desires. So the time had come. He would assemble the nations, gather them together, not in peace, but in judgment. For fire at his anger would consume the world, and there would be no place left to hide. And yet from the ruins, from the ashes of judgment, a new song would rise. He would not leave his people in despair. He would purify their lips, cleanse their hearts, and once again, they would call upon his name, not in fear, but in devotion. No longer scattered, no longer ashamed, they would return, drawn back to the presence of the one who had never truly abandoned them. Jerusalem would no longer be a place of arrogance, of defiance, but a home for the meek, for the humble, for those who sought the Lord in sincerity.